Hi, my name is John Press. And today I'll be talking about Matthew Arnold, a culturist literary Darwinist in America. Critics consider Matthew Arnold, who lived from 1822 to 1888, Victorian England's third greatest poet. However, after his marriage, he mostly stopped writing poetry and started writing essays and books. This work all aimed at guiding society, and to guide society, he made important contributions in education, literary criticism, religious theory, Celtic literature, Homeric translation, and social criticism. During Arnold's lifetime, religion and aristocracy were going down. At the same time, science and democracy were on the rise. Without religion and aristocracy, Arnold did not think science or democracy could provide a guiding ethos for society. As such, in the fields listed before, Arnold promoted a cultural-centered ethos to guide his society in these fields. In education, his professional field, Arnold promoted school subjects that developed what he called our best selves, individually and collectively. The resulting shared social cultural elevation was to smooth the change from the declining religious aristocratic order to the emerging scientific democratic order. Literary criticism's role in this effort amounted to cultivating a public that would understand literary standards, centered on what Arnold called the best that has been written, thought, and said in the world. His work championed literature that would uplift, inspire, and ennoble the public. This elevated public would, in turn, inspire artists to create great works. Arnold's religious books, they promoted the Bible as literature. He accepted the scientist's view that miracles do not happen. However, Arnold argued that the Bible still held ethical truths that we could see if we read the Bible as literature, as literary critics would. Seen as a literary masterpiece, the Bible could continue to guide Western culture. Arnold contrasted Celtic literature's sweetness and light to English literature in order to show that English culture wasn't imaginative enough. His Homeric translation work modeled the grand style he wished his era to have. And as for social criticism, his most famous book, Culture and Anarchy, suggested culture be used as a tool to stop excessive individualism, materialism, and social division. Culture was, in short, to stop anarchy. In summary, in his literary-centered efforts, Arnold sought to guide society via guiding the culture. Alas, after having worked as a school inspector for 35 years, when it was time to retire, Arnold had no money. As such, at the age of 60, he undertook a lecture tour of America. This talk will look at what Arnold's work and his lecture tour through America can teach literary Darwinists today. Hopefully, it will turn them into culturist literary Darwinists. Arnold's American tour. Arnold's tour of America lasted over 4 months. It went from October 22nd, 1883 to March 8th, 1884. And his itinerary took him from New York City, then he went up to New England, down to Washington, D.C. He skirted some southern states, went up to the Midwest, and briefly entered Canada before he went to New York City and home. 40,000 people came to see him lecture, a little over. And during his travels, he primarily repeated 3 speeches. They were numbers, Emerson, and literature and science. Now, nationalism colored much of America's reaction to Arnold and his to them. America resented Arnold. Some of America's resentment of Arnold came from his numbers speech. In this speech, Arnold worried more and more democracy would lead to Americanization, meaning democracy would lead to the West culture becoming crude, low, and fragmented. To avoid Americanization, a culture needs large numbers of cultural standard bearers, cultural critics, and that's why the speech is called Numbers. This speech questioned whether or not America actually had the necessary numbers of highly cultural literary scholars needed to keep democracy from Americanizing America. The responses were all nearly framed as one nation talking to another. Some American journalists and citizens tried to convince Arnold that America did have the large number of highly cultured people needed. Others wanted to show that America was too big, prosperous, and good-natured to care about the opinion of Europe. And while some people actually consider Arnold's arguments, most just defensively said either America is just as good as Europe, or Europe isn't as modern as America. Arnold's Emerson speech exposed regional rivalries in America. Ralph Waldo Emerson was from New England, and the people in New England were very proud of Emerson's literature. Upon arriving in New England, Arnold said Emerson was not one of the legitimate poets. The people of New England thought this was rude. They were angry even as Arnold's Emerson speech denounced base nationalism in literary criticism. The National Times gleefully mocked New England's anger with a sarcastic disbelief that anyone would doubt the near-biblical status of Emerson's writing. Arnold went to French Canada towards the end of his American tour. There he announced that Canada would not prosper as it should until more liberal views were entertained by the Church of Rome. Canadian newspapers did not appreciate Arnold's criticism of their culture either. Now, what is literary Darwinism? Literary Darwinism seeks to answer the question, what is art for? In nature, there's deadly competition. Inefficiencies cannot be sustained for long. But art, such as rituals, requires a lot of time and resources to prepare. Some art even involves cutting, right, which can lead to infection. From a Darwinist perspective, for the arts to have flourished so widely and for so long, they must have somehow have helped in survival. So literary Darwinists ask, what survival functions might literature serve? To answer these questions, literary Darwinists look at literary themes related to reproduction, such as sexual desire, jealousy, maternal love, status, and favoring kin. They compare our reproductive strategies to those found in other animals, and literary Darwinists use the Darwinian framework to question the likelihood of competing literary schools' readings. For example, they criticize the post-structuralist and feminist view that texts largely support artificial, arbitrary, oppressive social constructs. Literary Darwinists claim that literature does not stand apart from either our genetic behavioral tendencies or our culture. Rather, culture is a medium through which we organize our genetic behavioral tendencies. Culture guides the range of natural human behaviors. Literary Darwinists work for what they call consilience. This means the blending of the humanities and the sciences. To get consilience, literary Darwinist criticism talks about DNA, animal behavior, culture, and philosophy, of course, as well as literature. And again, literary Darwinists call this blending of the humanities and the sciences, the blending of arts and sciences, consilience. In his own time, people called Arnold a culturist. That's one who uses culture to guide society. Specifically, they called him a culturist because he promoted thinking of the Bible as literature in order to guide society. Therefore, in this paper, I'll use the term culturist in the same way, to indicate someone who uses literary criticism to guide society. To have full consilience, literary Darwinists must become culturist literary Darwinists. That is, for consilience to integrate the humanities and sciences, literary Darwinists must apply their work to social problems. They must be culturist, just like Arnold was. Arnold's call for consilience in America. Literature and Science was the speech Arnold gave most often during his American tour. In it, Arnold called for the uniting of literature and science. That is, again, what literary Darwinists call consilience. Literature and Science spoke against Thomas Huxley and others who wanted schools to teach science instead of literature and other humanities. But as a culturist, Arnold sought unity in society. Rather than rejecting science, Arnold called for the blending of literature and science, blending of the humanities with science. In short, again, he called for consilience. He famously said that we must know the best that has been thought and said in the world. But contrary to popular understanding, Arnold told his American audiences knowing the best that's been thought and said in the world not only required understanding literature, it also required understanding scientists such as Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and, yes, Darwin. Full cultivation requires consilience. In literature and science, Arnold spoke as a culturist and like a literary Darwinist. As a culturist would, Arnold said that he did not respect information that had no connection to life. Greek accents and physiology are but isolated facts, he claimed, adding, instrumental knowledge does not on its own lead to anything but being a specialist. If useful, it must relate to our instinct for beauty, our instinct for conduct. Literary Darwinism also appeared in his speech when Arnold told his American audiences we must follow the instinct for beauty and our instinct for conduct, because this means we rely on the constitution of human nature itself, on the instinct for self-preservation in humanity. So literature and science had culturist ideas, and it mentioned literary Darwinism. But the speech's main theme was consilience, the blending of literature and science in our schools. Arnold's literary Darwinism prior to his American tour. Arnold's 3 books on the Bible are his biggest attempts at consilience. That is because in these books he took a scientific approach to our most spiritual book, the Bible. Arnold argued that as culturists we must look to the Bible as literature and use it to guide society. But his books on religion also have his longest discussions of literary Darwinism. Here I will focus on the literary Darwinism in Arnold's biblical work. Brilliantly, Arnold argued that early man would have noticed that we do not choose what feels good. We are programmed to like food. We do not choose what is beautiful. These are instincts. He further noted that mood changes change our thoughts. This indicates that our minds are not under our conscious control. Arnold called early people's understanding that evolutionary programs ran their behavior the great not ourselves. The not ourselves, our evolutionary programmed morality, God. The Jews also wrote down these inborn moral rules, such as the impulse to honor thy father and mother, and they did so to make such moral tendencies, Arnold wrote, sure, solid and sacred part of the constitution of human nature. Naming innate morals God and writing them down gave them emotional force. Arnold thus defined religion as morality tinged with emotion. Arnold also examined how these religious statements became emotional. By systematic comparison, he found metaphor is what gives religious statements their emotional power. And Arnold historian A.P. Roberts called his comparative method scientific and experimental. Arnold even promoted a cultural group selection theory. 2 groups compete. Group A writes down that they must honor their parents into old age. Group B does not. Group A and its ethos would spread because their ethos brings, Arnold wrote, material success and order into homes. Arnold argued that Israel's rise verified the Bible's ability to make societies strong, and that this indicated that the Bible could continue to guide modern secular societies. As one of the leading educators of his time, based on his scientific studies of the Bible's impact, Arnold wrote a textbook of religious readings to emotionally connect students to morals and to their heritage. Writing a religious textbook to guide society shows that Arnold was not only an early literary Darwinist, he was an early culturist literary Darwinist. Now, how might Arnold's American tour help literary Darwinists become culturists? Many of Arnold's early literary Darwinist speculations have been confirmed by today's literary Darwinists. As such, Arnold should be recognized as a pioneering literary Darwinist. And since he used his works to address society's problems, Arnold should also be recognized as a pioneering culturist literary Darwinist. Unfortunately, today's literary Darwinists are not culturists. They do not apply their findings to social problems or cultural guidance. Yes, literary Darwinists attack post-structuralism and feminist literary theory by rightly noting that literature is grounded in biological reality, not just social constructs. But they then stop short of applying their findings to guiding society. And I would argue, in our time of increased single parenthood, crime, drug abuse, and reality television, literary critics need to promote the best that has been thought and said in the world in its biological context more than ever. Furthermore, until literary Darwinists apply their findings to society, they will not have the consilience they dream about. Nearly every literary Darwinist book tells us that they do not fully apply their findings to social issues due to a fear of being called social Darwinists, and thus being associated with Nazis or racists. And while not wanting such associations is more than justified, literary Darwinists are now irrelevant because they ignore social issues, such as literature's role in stabilizing culture, the connection between morals and society's survival, and even the clash of civilizations. So again, how might Arnold's American tour help literary Darwinists become culturists? 1. Literary Darwinists must again recognize the reality of national cultures and guide them. Biologists and anthropologists are now supporting Arnold's theory of cultural group selection. The resentment caused by Arnold's speeches in America, New England, and Canada provides evidence for cultural group identity. Guiding cultures is a literary critic's role. We must care about literature's moral implications and guide our nation's souls. We must, like Arnold, become culturists again. Secondly, Arnold's speeches in America counter the fear that all nationalistic uses of literature imply crude, militaristic social Darwinism. His speeches did not call for blind allegiance to a militant state. He got in trouble because he came to America and criticized it. He also criticized his nation, England. Arnold's cultural work called for criticizing our culture, not blind celebrations of competition and war. Thirdly, Arnold's speeches provide us with a model of bravery in the face of public disapproval. In today's permissive cultural climate, it's scary to promote some standards and behaviors and condemn others. But biology teaches that heterosexuality must be the norm if a society is to propagate itself. Having a mother and father are crucial to youth's thriving, and that literature has a nationalistic role to play. Arnold shows us how to bravely take unpopular stances with humor and style. Lastly, Arnold shows us that culturist literary Darwinism can be very positive. We are moral and frequently beautiful. Literature reaffirms our natural tendency to cheer for the good guy and hate the bad guy. And if propaganda films do get made that aim to create hate, the content of Arnold's American tour provides protection. His numbers speech scolded America for its materialism and want of soul and delicacy. In Emerson, he promoted standards of literary greatness, and in literature and science, he praised our instinct for beauty. True culturist literary Darwinist promotes cultivation, not hatred. For today's literary Darwinists to be relevant and to achieve intellectual consilience, they must follow the example that Arnold set in America. They must cease only being literary Darwinists. They must become, as Arnold was, culturist literary Darwinists. Thank you very much.